We've seen a lot of new platform fighters coming out in the last few years, which got me thinking about a very forgotten one, PlayStation All Stars Battle Royale. This game got a lot of hate at the time, and it was really not a success for Sony, but personally, I always really liked this game. However, it did have many faults that ultimately contributed to its failure. In early development, the game was known as Title Fight, and it was going to be developed by an unknown studio called Superbot Entertainment. If you've never heard of Superbot Entertainment, I wouldn't blame you. PlayStation All Stars was going to be their first ever game. How did this brand new studio become the developers of such a massive PlayStation first-party game? Well, Superbot had been formed in 2009 by Shannon Studstill and Chan Park, two people who used to work for Santa Monica, so they already had that prior connection there with Sony. The game was officially revealed in April 2012. The feedback from the internet at the time was pretty negative, with a lot of people dismissing it as just a Smash clone. The game got ripped to shreds, honestly, with people just finding it hilarious that PlayStation was actually trying to do this. I always felt the initial reception was a little bit harsh. I mean, yeah, the game was very clearly meant to be PlayStation's version of Smash Bros, but I guess I just never really saw a big issue with that. At its core, Smash Bros is a platform fighter, and having a PlayStation platform fighter alongside Nintendo's sounded pretty cool to me. The game released in November 2012 to average reviews, but regardless of all that history, what did I think of the game? PlayStation All Stars is far from perfect, but I actually enjoyed this game quite a bit. I didn't play it when it first came out, but I got around to it in 2016 on my Vita, and I even platinumed it. I'm a big fan of platform fighters, as well as a huge PlayStation guy, so it was definitely a great match for me. The game starts off strong with one of the coolest game intros I can think of. It uses a copyrighted song, so I can't play it for you, but I would highly recommend looking it up. You will not be disappointed. Right away, the roster of characters always struck me as really good. It has the usual PlayStation icons you would expect, like Kratos, Nathan Drake, and Ratchet & Clank. At the same time, they did a good job incorporating some lesser known characters from PlayStation's history, such as Sir Daniel and Toro. The game also includes some third-party characters, and I always felt some of the third-party characters were a bit lackluster, such as Dante from the Devil May Cry reboot somehow making it into the game. However, these third-party characters do kind of represent what big games were coming out soon at the time, such as the DMC reboot, Metal Gear Solid Revengeance, and Bioshock Infinite. So their inclusion is cool kind of as a timepiece, but it causes these characters to stick out strangely among the more iconic members of the roster. Looking back now, the roster does seem kind of small with only 20 characters total. 4 DLC characters would come later, making the final roster 24. Like I said, that is kind of small by today's standards, especially, comparing it to Smash Ultimate, but at the time I think this was an acceptable amount. And it helps that they did a great job giving each character a moveset that really does represent their respective games well. And they also did a good job making most of the characters feel and play differently from one another. I think the best thing this game has to offer is the stages. They are super cool and unique, with each stage being a combination of 2 franchises. For example, as you battle on the Uncharted 3 plane level, the blimp from Bioshock will suddenly appear in the background. Or as you battle on the God of War stage, Patapon will appear and start having a dance party. Having each map be a combination of 2 different franchises was such a great idea, and it's probably the biggest thing that sets this game apart from Smash. On the topic of combining franchises, this game also had a loose theme of rivals, where each character had one specific rival. Some of these rivalries made sense, such as Nathan Drake and Sly Cooper, since they are both thieves. Others were pretty silly and random, like Big Daddy and Sackboy. I thought these rivalries were really cute and added an element of character interaction that was really cool to see. I'm sure everyone who grew up with a PS2 felt some kind of way seeing Jak and Daxter interact with Ratchet and Clank. However, this rivalry system doesn't really add much. There's a quick cutscene for each character and their rival during arcade mode, and that's about it. I wish they had done more with this concept, because I do think it's something that really could have helped differentiate this game from Smash Bros. But now it's time to talk about the flaws, and sadly there are quite a few. For me, the game's biggest flaw was its combat system, which does not work how you would expect. Most platform fighters follow the Smash Bros formula, which is as you battle, your percentage builds, and the higher it gets, the closer you will be to losing a life if you get hit again. But PlayStation All Stars chose to mix things up. In this game, as you battle, you will fill up your All-Star power bar. As the bar increases, you will have the ability to perform super moves with 3 varying levels of effectiveness. Hitting an opponent with your super move is the only way to get a KO in the game. It's not an awful system, but I'm just not a huge fan. Like, it works and it makes sense, but I just find myself wishing it played like a normal platform fighter. A lot of times, the matches just feel like you are mindlessly mashing, waiting for your meter to fill. And this is partly because of the varying levels of super moves that I mentioned. For most characters, use their level 3 super move is basically an instant kill attack. This means that there is sometimes not really a reason to want to use your level 1 or level 2 supers since they're often harder to hit. This is especially true if you are playing a match with 3 or 4 players, since the level 3 will typically take all of them out instead of just one. With that said though, not all level 1 or level 2 supers are created equal. For example, Ratchet & Clank's level 1 super is extremely powerful, easily able to take out 3 enemies right in a row. But meanwhile, other level 1s are super tough to hit, like Nathan Drake's lob attack, which I found very hard to aim. I mean, look at this clip where the CPU's level 1 super makes him stand still with a super slow moving reticle. I'm able to let the full animation of my taunt play out and still have time to dodge it. And then I use Ratchet's level 1 and immediately get a kill. Now granted, I am playing against bots in these clips, so that could play a role, but I think you see my point. This can cause some big issues with certain matchups, especially in a 1v1 setting. One player might have a really strong level 1 super, while the other player is left desperately scrambling trying to build up to a level 2 or 3. That means the player with the strong level 1 could easily get a kill or two before the other player can even charge up to the supers that they need. Another big issue is I feel like this system takes away some of the more skillful and technical styles of play that you might see in other platform fighters. Something like a spike or an edge guard, they don't exist in PlayStation All Stars. Each match kind of just boils down to who can build up more supers the fastest, which is kind of lame. And it can also make matches feel really slow as everyone just aimlessly smacks each other around until they build the super they want. Now it's obvious why the developers made this change. They wanted to try and stop the notion that this game was just a Smash clone. So they created this whole new fighting system to show that they were different. But in the end, that really did nothing. It didn't stop anyone from calling the game a Smash clone or a Smash ripoff. So now, we're left with a worse combat system, and the game was still called the Smash ripoff, so nothing was achieved. No changes, big or small, would change the way that this game was viewed. So you may as well just stick with the formula that works, because the solution they went with basically meant that no one was happy. The people who wanted to be angry and hate on the game for being a Smash clone did just that, regardless of the changes that were made. Meanwhile, someone like me who comes in with an open mind is let down by these gameplay decisions. Although I'm not a huge fan of the combat system, I have seen some people say they like it, and like I said, it does get the job done. I was able to look past it and still spend a lot of time playing the game. However, there are some other major flaws. The first issue is a poor single player experience. The arcade mode is the only real form of single player content in the game, and it was pretty lacking. It does have a cool theme, with each character's arcade mode run having an intro and outro, which is meant to loosely explain their involvement in the game and their reasons for being there. This is a cool concept, and they did a good job sticking to the individual styles of each game, and of course had full voice acting. However, all of these intros and outros were just still images with dialogue. They weren't fully animated, and this really rubbed people the wrong way because it felt cheap. As I mentioned earlier, there were short animated cutscenes between the rivals during each arcade mode run, but they are super short and don't always look the best. Unfortunately for PlayStation All Stars, the most recent Smash Bros game at the time was Brawl, which had the best single player experience we've ever seen from Smash with Subspace Emissary. When you look back at the fully animated gorgeous cutscenes in Subspace Emissary and then compare them to the clips from PlayStation All Stars, it looks really bad. And it's even worse when you consider the fact that Brawl had come out 4 years earlier on a console with significantly worse graphical power. Ironically, I think modern Smash Bros has suffered a similar fate, with the single player modes feeling increasingly bare bones. And really across the entire board of platform fighters, single player has been super neglected, especially arcade modes. So if PlayStation All Stars were to release today, I actually think people would see this as pretty good by arcade mode standards. But the expectations were different back then. And these seemingly low budget arcade mode cutscenes did not help with the already negative perception of the game. PlayStation All Stars struggles with a lack of content in general. There really is not a lot of things to do in this game, especially if we're comparing it to Smash Bros. Of course, PlayStation All Stars has the typical multiplayer modes, however, the online servers are long gone. For single player content, it has the arcade mode, which we've touched on, and there is also combat trials. Combat trials are a set of challenges, with each character having about 20 of them. These challenges typically entail using only one type of move throughout a match, winning games with a certain rule set, or completing matches without dying. These are okay time wasters, but they just really aren't memorable at all. I genuinely forgot these were even in the game before going back for this video. I would much prefer something like Smash's iconic Break the Targets minigame. Another thing that I've always loved about Smash is the insane amount of fan service put into those games. Things like the assist trophies or the music unlockables allow Smash Bros to serve as a literal encyclopedia of everything Nintendo. And PlayStation All Stars just just has none of that. There's a character bios section with a short paragraph for each one, and that's it. And there's a lot left to be desired from the unlockables. Each character has just one unique skin, a few taunts, and a couple different intros and outros. There is a good amount of player profile customization, but that is pretty worthless now since, like I mentioned, the servers are offline. Overall, I just wish they had spent more time fleshing all these things out further, because with the way it ended up, it makes the game feel kind of lifeless. It makes it feel like there wasn't too much love of PlayStation put into it. If you've played Astro's Playroom on PS5, then you know exactly what I'm wanting here. It would have been cool to see this game be more of a celebration of PlayStation's history in the way that Astro's Playroom is. Ultimately, all of these issues caused the game's demise. Despite the unique combat system, the game didn't do enough to make itself stand out, and that's why it was never able to break free of the Smash clone perception. And in the end, it pretty much was just a Smash alternative for PlayStation players. I don't think there was necessarily anything wrong with that, but it just didn't click for consumers. The game is confirmed to have sold at least 1 million copies, so it wasn't a total flop, but it also wasn't good enough to warrant Sony wanting any sequels. And sadly, the developers were never really able to bounce back from this game, with Sony cutting ties with Superbot Entertainment in 2013. And the studio hasn't really done anything since. And with their website and social media having gone dark since 2014, they are considered defunct, although an official announcement was never made. Ultimately, I think Sony was just left feeling like the average sales numbers weren't really worth all the flack they took for making a Smash clone. Now personally, I would love to see PlayStation All Stars make a comeback, and honestly I think now would be a great time to do it with a lot of other platform fighters seeing success such as Brawlhalla. I think gamers in general would be more receptive to the whole concept than they were back in 2012. And in the time since the original game, Sony has introduced a lot of new characters and IPs that would be perfect for a game like this, such as Horizon or Ghost of Tsushima. Sadly though, I highly doubt it will ever come back. I think Sony was just way too turned off by the Smash clone backlash. Despite all of its flaws, I have great memories with PlayStation All Stars, and going back to play it for this video, I did have fun, even if I was stuck playing against bots. I will always stand by the fact that this game deserved better.